She wore threadbare clothes that hung loose on her thin frame, her hair deliberately tangled, dirt smudged across her cheeks. Sarah Mitchell looked nothing like the successful art curator she actually was. Instead, she looked like someone the world had forgotten, and that was exactly the point. Across from her sat David Chen, CEO of one of the nation's fastest-growing tech companies, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit. His expression shifted from confusion to concern as he studied the woman who'd just sat down at their table at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The maître d' had nearly refused her entry. Other diners whispered and stared. But David simply pulled out her chair and smiled warmly. "Sarah?" he asked gently. "That's me," she replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. What David didn't know was that this bizarre first impression was part of Sarah's unconventional test, one born from a painful past that had taught her to see beyond surface appearances. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah's best friend Emma had enthusiastically set up this blind date. "He's successful, handsome, and actually nice," Emma had gushed. "But more importantly, he volunteers at the community center every Saturday. I think you two would really connect." Sarah had been skeptical. Her last relationship had ended catastrophically when her ex-fiancé, Marcus, revealed his true colors. They'd been together for 2 years, planning a future, until the day Sarah lost her job during company downsizing. Within weeks, Marcus's affection evaporated. He became distant, critical, and finally admitted he'd only stayed because of her prospects. The betrayal had shattered something fundamental in Sarah's ability to trust. "I need to know someone's character before I invest my heart again," Sarah had told Emma that night over wine. "I need to see how they treat someone who seemingly has nothing to offer them." That's when the idea struck her. It was unconventional, perhaps even crazy. But Sarah had learned that people reveal their truest selves when they think no one important is watching. Now, sitting across from David in her disguise, Sarah braced herself for rejection. She'd prepared for him to make excuses, to leave, to be polite but dismissive. Instead, David signaled the waiter. "Could we have some water, please? And perhaps the menu?" He turned back to Sarah. "Emma told me you love Italian food. The pasta here is supposed to be incredible." Sarah's carefully constructed walls faltered slightly. "You're not going to ask why I'm dressed like this?" David paused, choosing his words carefully. "I figure you have your reasons. We all fight battles others can't see." He leaned forward slightly. "But I am curious about you. Sarah, Emma says you have an incredible eye for art. Tell me about that." For the next hour, something unexpected happened. They talked. Really talked. David didn't flinch at her appearance. He didn't glance around nervously at other diners or check his phone repeatedly. Instead, he listened intently as Sarah shared her passion for discovering underappreciated artists, her voice gradually growing more animated. When the waiter brought their meals, Sarah noticed his barely concealed disdain as he served her. David noticed too. "Excuse me," David said firmly. "I'd appreciate it if you treated my date with the same respect you'd show anyone else in this restaurant." The waiter's face flushed. "Of course, sir. My apologies." After he left, David shook his head. "People forget that dignity isn't determined by designer labels." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "That's a rare perspective for someone in your position." "Is it?" David smiled sadly. "My parents immigrated here with nothing. My dad worked 3 jobs while my mom cleaned offices at night. I was 12 before. I owned jeans that didn't have patches." He met her eyes directly. "I learned early that kindness costs nothing, but its value is immeasurable." As dinner progressed, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying David's company. He was thoughtful, funny, and refreshingly honest. He spoke about his company's initiatives to create job training programs in underserved communities, not with boastfulness, but with genuine passion. He asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. When dessert arrived, David excused himself briefly. Sarah watched him stop at a nearby table where an elderly woman dined alone. He spoke with her for several minutes, his face kind and attentive. When he returned, Sarah raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Mrs. Patterson?" he explained. "She was my high school English teacher. Changed my life by believing in me when I was ready to drop out. I try to check in on her when I can." Sarah's carefully maintained composure was crumbling. This man was nothing like Marcus. nothing like what she'd expected. As they prepared to leave, a homeless man approached their table near the restaurant's entrance. Most diners looked away uncomfortably. The maitre d' moved to intercept him, but David held up a hand. "Hey, friend," David said warmly. "Are you hungry?" The man nodded hesitantly. Without fanfare, David spoke quietly to the maitre d', arranging and paying for a full meal. Then he did something that made Sarah's heart stop. He sat down with the man, just for a few minutes, treating him like an old friend rather than an inconvenience. Sarah felt tears threatening. She'd constructed this elaborate test, this disguise, to protect herself from being hurt again. But watching David's effortless compassion, his genuine kindness to everyone regardless of their status, she realized something profound. Authenticity can't be faked, and true character reveals itself in countless small moments. When David returned to walk her out, Sarah stopped him on the sidewalk outside. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm not actually homeless. I'm not struggling. This was—" She gestured to her appearance. "This was a test." She explained everything: Marcus's betrayal, her broken trust, her desperate need to see David's true character. "I know it was manipulative and unfair, and you have every right to be furious with me." David was quiet for a long moment, processing. Sarah prepared herself for justified anger, for him to walk away. Instead, he surprised her again. "I'm not angry," he said slowly. "I'm sad that someone hurt you badly enough that you felt this was necessary." He studied her face. "But I'm also grateful." "Grateful? You showed me something tonight, too," David said. "You showed me courage. It takes guts to make yourself vulnerable like this, even in disguise. And you showed me that you're someone who thinks deeply about character and values." He smiled gently. "Those are pretty attractive qualities, Sarah, even covered in stage makeup and borrowed clothes." Sarah laughed through her tears. "So you knew? I suspected by the entree. Your hands were too clean, and you quoted Rothko during dessert." He grinned. "Didn't seem to fit the image." They stood on that Manhattan sidewalk as the city buzzed around them, two people who'd each been testing the other in their own way. Sarah had dressed as someone society overlooks to see if David would see her humanity. David had simply been himself, treating everyone with the same fundamental respect. "Can we start over?" Sarah asked. "The real me would like to take you to this little coffee shop in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy. Just good conversation and terrible poetry readings on Tuesday nights." David's eyes lit up. "I love terrible poetry." 3 months later, Sarah would bring David to the art gallery where she worked, introducing him to her world. 6 months after that, David would propose not at a fancy restaurant, but at that little Brooklyn coffee shop, during a particularly awful open mic night, because it was where their real story began. But that night, on their first date, they simply walked through New York together, a CEO and a curator who'd both learned that the most valuable things in life can't be measured by appearance, status, or wealth. They'd learned that love, real love, begins when you see someone's heart clearly, when kindness is instinctive rather than calculated, and when you choose compassion even when no one's watching. Sometimes the best way to find real connection is to strip away all pretense, to test not from cruelty, but from self-protection, and to remain open enough to recognize authenticity when it appears. Sarah had shown up to that date dressed like someone invisible, and David had done the most radical thing possible. He'd truly seen her anyway.